And we'll be back from the break. You're still watching SmartMates Business, your daily Kickstarter. But of course, before we get into any further discussions, definitely don't forget the markets on the Zabu, which are about to open in a few minutes from now. *292# is the USSD code, which will definitely lead you there, where you can buy government bonds and securities for as little as 15,000. Now the markets will be opening at 8:15, closing at 3:15, and this is effective Monday up to Friday, except on the weekends and the public holidays when the markets are not accessible. But of course, you have the rest of the days of the week to capitalize and make quite some huge profits there. Something which is quite very key and influential. Zabu made this a reality. There is no excuse as why you shouldn't really own government bonds and securities with such an opportunity. With only 15,000, Zabu says, let's just start with 15,000 to make life easy for you. Zabu told you, my money, my future, and also East Africa, do something new. Now let's head straight to our business tips and quotes for the day to start your day inspired. Well, that is regarding the business tips and quotes at exactly 8 minutes past 8. Now, before we get into any further, let's take a look at what's really happening, what's trending on social media, and definitely having some sort of a business sense. Well, this is at Abdul Aman 13. Of course, he says, let's promote quality education and equitable education in Uganda. Even the rural areas matter, that is in terms of service delivery. Yeah, that is at Abdul Anan 13, giving out that opinion regarding that perspective, equity in terms of education provision. Now this is at Luhi Jem. He says, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Beautiful people are watching this post. Please, with the elite, you can contribute many regarding this. This is at Kalyango Mahil, says the next hashtag should be Uganda Universal Education Exhibition. Wow. To showcase the folds and faults that are transpiring in the Ramos-shackled universal education in Uganda, including UPE and USE. Now, thanks. This is at Farido Official. At Farido Official said at Janet Museveni, thanks for all you have done. Mother, I would go to appreciate you for fighting for the girl child education in Uganda. Well, that's that. This is at Med Villa 11. Says Uganda's education system is the worst in Africa. Ugandan teachers are paid peanuts, no infrastructures. A science teacher gets just 5 million, and an arts teacher just 400,000. Education section neglected. Lucky you went to private schools. Wow. So if you went to private schools, you're lucky. Well, that's people have different experiences. Now this is at Silas Bubu. He says the Uganda education system produces more rejects than professionals, and it's the rejects who occupy the available opportunities because they are connected. Now the qualified end up in the streets complaining of unemployment, while dimwits scale ladders to top political positions. That is at Silas Bubu putting out that opinion, saying that rejects actually seem to be, more connected. And now this is at Arthur Fofo. He says another problem we have in Uganda are the educated people working with international organizations. That's the NGOs. Of course, they dumped honesty and objectivity long time ago. Okay. Now this is at Ray Nakant. Says, of course, President Museveni, when we arrived on the scene in 1960s, this is a statement, we quickly learned via analysts that free education for all and family participation in the economy might revolutionize Uganda's economy. That is at Ara Nakant with that opinion. Well, that is regarding what is happening there into what's trending, of course, rotating around education. Well, now as we switch next to our business trends this morning, still in relation to the topic about the state of education in Uganda, the state of education in Africa at large. It's quite very key and important to notice that out. Now, I'm joined with Joram as we are going to have this, insight, this discussion even much more deeper in relation to what is happening around Uganda and as we relate it to around Africa. Very good morning, Joram, and you're very welcome on Smart Means Business.
Good morning. And of course, good morning to our dear viewers wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
And let me hope everyone is doing well. Because for us, we are here to make sure that you kickstart off your morning like usual.
Exactly.
Pretty much a lot of information that is rotating around. That is rotating around the current affairs. Looking into the business trends and basically rotating around lots of things. And that is why we are now heading into the state of education in Africa to steadily look at how things are. And you never know how we can get to a conclusion as a country that there are some changes that we need to really work upon.
It's very striking as we take a look here about how education is standing in Africa today, the products that are being put out there. In the report here, as we're going to be taking a look there about the state of education in Africa, as we have just brief highlights to be displayed there as we take a look together on a brief summary. Joram, it's very... the first statement is quite very absurd that 90% of sub-Saharan African children cannot read and understand a simple text by the age of 10. I mean, you see, now that's the foundation, of any education, the kindergarten, the nursery. It can be quite a little bit very, very absurd. One striking statistics puts it in context that the state of education in Africa today, according to the latest global education update, 9 out of 10 children in sub-Saharan Africa are unable to read and understand simple text by age 10. Now, if the foundation is weakened,
Well, I think when you look at the fact that by the age of 10, I think this would be a statistic that needs to be further revised. Reason being, you get to realize that at least, I should say 10, I think it's supposed to even be 10 out of 10 because at least by that age, in Uganda, for example, at that age, most of the pupils are already
a bit grown up.
Yeah, either primary 4, primary 5.
But
so that means you're ready, at least you're able to read
something.
Because when they say in sub-Saharan Africa unable to read by the age of 10, I pretty much think it's quite of a thing that we really need to look at as something. This is where at times I don't go deeper into these statistics because if I'm to look at Uganda, for example, at the age of 7 to 8, at least someone is able to read, because most that age bracket in Uganda here in the normal primary education, that person is either in primary 3 at the age of 7, rather 8, primary 3, or primary 4. So by that age, 8, 9, 10, you expect a child to know how to read their name, pronounce maybe the basics of life, the simple basics, know how to greet all these salutations and stuff. So this is why I clearly think maybe in context of the rural areas, because when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, it takes a lot of other countries here.
Because there is a country called the Central African Republic.
Exactly.
It's one of the Central African Republic and Niger.
Niger, okay.
Very vast state, by the way.
By the education sector.
Exactly.
But you see, I think the attributes of such statistics for the viewers, briefly, at times are relating to the state of the education standards of the country. But at times, if you're to look at sub-Saharan Africa, most of the countries at least have been able to provide education facilities and everything. So these education facilities at times, you get to realize that one, they've been able to shape up the education of these young, the system that has been put up, the curriculums and everything. We've seen people who go to international schools. I believe in Chad and Niger, there are also other international schools. So such international schools, this is where, parents who earn more money or who can afford these services can take their students there. But I think it again goes back to the time the child has started doing school. Because when you look at these statistics, ideally it is because of the fact that there are some countries where the poverty levels make it worse for someone to attain good education or to go to school. And
absolutely true.
The age, why I'm saying the age at which you start school also determines how productive you can get, or how it also projects your development in learning. Because at the first few elements in kindergarten or nursery is looking at how someone write,
very true,
and read. Those are the first two things that I'm mainly, more focused on during the early stages of education. They first of all look at, can a child write? Can a child read? So reading, maybe, can this person read? Let's say if I wrote something like food or a pet, can this child be able to read it? Can this child be able to pronounce or, let's say, write about it? And so by the look of things, as you can see, you get to realize that globally 70% of children cannot perform such of these tasks due to COVID-19 school closures. And again, this takes us back to the earlier
what happened
when we were in COVID, because at that time there were students who were supposed to be in school, or there were pupils or young children who were supposed to get into school, but they couldn't. But then they were sit at home, and the age was, moving on, and you sit at home, but you're still growing, I should say.
Exactly.
So the more you're home, it doesn't mean that you're growing any younger, and that is what happened during COVID. But with time, you come to realize that I think that is one of the reasons as to why most of these statistics are rotating around most of these children that are below the age of 10.
All right, still further reviewing the state of education that is in Africa. But despite where it stands lately, we shall not turn our eye down, of course, not to also observe what are those achievements, what are those little achievements that the education system in Africa at least has been able to look through. Jerome, I believe that despite the loopholes we look into the system, there are always achievements. And now let's have a brief look at the achievements there, what the education system in Africa has achieved, at least for the past few decades. Of course, these coming in from various donations. Now, that's the progress, in African education. We see over 22,500 new classrooms built in Rwanda. That is between 2019 up to 2022. I think that's quite okay. 2.3 million more students enrolled in free primary schools, that is in the Democratic Republic of Congo during the 2021 and up to 2022 school year. Some progress. And 75% increase in accredited higher education, and of course education program enrollment in Mozambique between 2018 and 2022, and 27,000 adolescents and adolescent girls and women in Somalia provided with literacy and numeracy, life and vocational skills. Then lastly, among us, at least some few examples of progress here, we see there is significant increase in inclusive education resource centers in Ethiopia, supporting more than 61,000 children with special needs. I think we shall congratulate that, and of course that is funding from the International Development Association, the World Bank's Fund for the Poorest Economies. These funds have been used to be able to establish such related developments. But then away from that, there is another angle, another aspect here. Joram, one of the aspects as why Africa, we are in absolute poverty. The financial stress is too on the peak, and the education is amongst those that are key financial stress factors in Africa. And I think that explains why we grew up with this mindset that education was like, whoa, first of all, remember your parent is worried, financial stress.
Yeah.
So it's going to take you to school with a mindset of like is investing in you.
So you have to
perform
well.
You perform.
Because the reason is why every time you're at school and you fail to perform according to the grading, parents get angry. That's
some
where
could
parents
even
end up beating children simply because the child has failed to perform. Exactly. Even when the parents themselves couldn't perform well, but simply because the parent is injecting money into you, they believe you have to perform accordingly. And it hurts them when you're not meeting the standards or what they expected you to do. So in the long run, this is why most parents end up finding it difficult to contain their emotions when a child fails academically.
And now you see, now we're in holidays as we speak right now. Now parents must be now thinking already towards there, and that is enough.
In 2 weeks time, we'll be taking the children back for second time. So,
you see, and that is very, very clear. And now let's take a look at the worry, at the rate at which Africans worry, most especially adults that are responsible for paying school fees and and other related school dues. You get to realize, a share of adults most financially worried about school fees. Uganda, where we are down, we are there. Our percentage is around 42%, and the country with the highest worry, where adults worry about school fees, is Liberia, quite very high at 60% worry rate. I think that is something very, very, very crucial to look into. But now, there have been quite some questions, Joram, regarding the possible solutions to avert that trend, financial worried. And when they are worried and, they put all this frustration towards the kids, the kids don't really perform to their expectations because it seems like a punishment. And, a time comes and if a child feels like they're helping you to study, and with that way, they can deliberately not perform to their best as a way of retaliating, you beating them back. But of course, this comes back later in the future. But it shouldn't be this way always, as we're seeing. Now, you can compare all that as you take a look at where Uganda stands. But the country with the most adults that are worried about fees is Liberia. Yes, Liberia. And that, in a way, limits growth and prosperity among us there, because the energy which you would have spent to think of developmental ideas, generating money, it's largely focused on your worry towards paying fees, And you see, even in some countries like Uganda, where, of course, I know we have the universal education, but you still find that parents still have to meet some needs. It's not 100% entirely government supporting school uniforms, probably even the books.
The government now, in most of the government schools, by the way, is only providing room for the education itself.
Exactly.
Because when you look at the USCE or BIT-PLE, non-PLE rather, the Universal Secondary and Universal Primary, UPE. When you look at most of these schools now, a child comes with their books, you have to buy pens, even the uniforms are supposed to be paid for, lunch, now is supposed to be paid for, especially in USCE. For the UPE, lunches is availed, but now times have really changed simply because the school administration cannot wait for government money all the time to run the school. That is why you realize every time at least a child is supposed to pay certain fees or what you could call the development fees. Why? The development fees always help into the operations as they wait for the long run of government.
As government brings
the government brings in the money, the students are supposed to be paying in some money that will keep the school going. Because either way, the cost of doing business becomes really hard. One could clearly say it's not supposed to be a business, but hey, after all, no one is coming in to do a charity work. If I told you you're a teacher, you trained as a professional. So that means if you're trained as a professional, at the end of the day, you expect a paycheck.
Exactly.
And that is why you realize that it has become really worrying across Africa, regardless of the fact that the government is paying money for these students. It's not really enough.
It's not effectual.
For the schools to survive on only that.
Okay. It's very interesting how you're studying in a UP and USE, but you're still worried about fees. That is really something very devastating, not healthy at all to the country's prosperity. Well, it's 27 minutes past 8, and now we're going to get into a short commercial break. But of course, before we get there, don't forget the markets on the Zabo platform, which I've already opened as I speak right now. *292# is the USSD code, which will avail you with quite lots of options where you can buy government bonds and securities for just as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. Now the markets open at 8:15 and they'll be closing at 3:15, and this is effective Monday up to Friday, except on the weekends and the public holidays. Now, like tomorrow, we're heading to the weekend. The markets won't be operating till Monday again. But of course, you have the rest of the days, despite those exceptions, for you to make quite some huge profits. Zabo just made this a reality. There is no excuse this time around why you're not buying government bonds and securities. Zabo says, my money, my future, and all Texas East Africa tells you, do something new. Now let's get into a short break, and of course, coming up, we shall be having quite many very interesting discussions. We shall be looking at what's happening in the world of sports business, looking at entertainment, and also our developing story. Good morning.